The beast wakes on the asphalt, rolling out from the cathedral of steel where raw ambition meets the cold, hard reality of flight engineering. Walk the floor of this iron fortress where engines hang in silent rows and the air hums with the electric pulse of relentless industry. Deep in the freeze, workers wrestle the black blood of the machine, heavy rolls of carbon fiber waiting to be born into rigid strength. The yellow arm strikes with purpose, laying down the black tape on silver skin, building the fuselage layer by layer with unyielding mechanical force. Watch the head track the curve, a relentless dance of pressure and precision that fuses the composite into a shell stronger than any steel. The massive door swings shut like a vault, sealing the vessel tight to bake the structure under crushing pressure and searing transformative heat. Red lasers cut the darkness, mapping the grid on the hull while the locking ring grinds into place, securing the chamber for the curer. She scans the black surface, hunting for imperfections with the digital eye that sees what no human can, certifying the alignment is absolutely dead on. A mountain of composite rises into the air, lifted by cables of steel as the nose section floats above the concrete floor of the shop. Muscle meets machine as hands tighten the frame while the automated riveter moves in to drive the metal home with cold, calculating perfect speed. The drill screams against the surface, boring through the skin while the operator stands watch, trusting the code to guide the bit without error. Silent wheels roll heavy across the epoxy, carrying the dark wing skin through the aisle, guided by unseen lines in the steady hand of logistics. The yellow fixture descends from above, locking onto the panel with a vacuum grip that refuses to let go, ready for the heavy lift. This gantry dominates the space, sliding into position to puncture the wing with thousands of precise holes, preparing the structure for its final shape. Metal shreds and coolant flies as the bit bites deep, carving the path for fasteners that will hold this bird together against the wind. The robot punches this copper pin in, and she follows up with the wrench, feeling for the click that proves the joint is solid. Inside the ribcage of the beast, they seal the joints by hand, wiping the seams clean in the echo of the hollow fuselage. Steel wrenches clamp down on silver pipes, tightening the veins of the aircraft where hydraulic fluid will soon flow under immense life-giving pressure. The crane lowers the dark skin onto the skeleton, a marriage of ribs and cover that creates the lifting surface for the long haul. He leans into the wrench with full weight, locking the bolt down until the metal groans and the tool snaps its final safe approval. Finish the job right with the grit of the paper, sanding the black skin smooth until every flaw is erased from the composite surface. It is a snake pit of copper and plastic, thousands of wires bundled tight by hand into the nervous system that wakes the machine. They feed the heavy serpent through the ribs, clamping the harness to the frame to carry the signals that command flight from the cockpit. The red line sweeps the gray fin, mapping the aerodynamic curve to ensure the wind breaks exactly how we designed it to break. Deep inside the metal guts, the camera probe snakes through the dark channels, hunting for clearance in spaces where no human hand can reach. Sound waves punch through the carbon layers, reading the density on the screen to prove the structure is solid all the way through. Seal the metal against the elements with thick green paste, curing it with heat to ensure corrosion never finds a foothold on this part. 4 pairs of hands guide the massive inlet as it floats down from the crane, heavy steel chains groaning under the suspended weight. The low platform carries the long black wing through the factory, a silent electric hauler, moving the heavy lifting surface to the next station. Measure the cutout on the barrel with steel tape, checking the frame dimensions to ensure the glass fits tight against the fuselage skin. Lasers scan the black shell for center, while the crew slides the aluminum ring into the belly, locking the structural ribs into place. A massive section of the fuselage rolls down the wide aisle, carried by the heavy mover that navigates the concrete floor with absolute power. Red beams cross the gap, guiding the 2 giant tubes together until the alignment marks line up perfect for the final heavy join. The yellow arms slide into their battle stations, tracking the seam with electronic eyes, ready to stitch the composite skin into one piece. The probe touches the edge, reading the gap down to the micron on the screen, verifying the fit is tight before we drill. The machine head screams as it bores into the join, driving fasteners through the thick hull, while coolant sprays in a pressurized mist. She drives the rivet home with a heavy gun, the impact rattling the frame as she secures the vertical seam with brute force. Darkness turns to solid wall as the sections meet the gap, closing tight until the massive tubes become one single unbroken pressure vessel. The crane drops the gray dome into the tail, sealing the pressure boundary with a heavy steel wall that holds the cabin air. High above the floor, they line up the vertical fin, locking the stabilizer onto the mounts to steer this giant through the sky. The wrench locks the silver hydraulic muscle to the tail fin, aligning the actuator that forces the massive rudder against the rushing wind. The black cockpit rides the heavy electric hauler, rolling silent and slow across the factory floor to meet the body of the beast. Sections collide and mate as we build the door linkage inside, testing the gears that will seal the passengers safely inside the hull. Stainless steel snaps together with a solid clunk, connecting the high-pressure lines that will pump lifeblood through the veins of this machine. They lay the composite deck on the beams, drilling the floorboards down tight to build the stage where the payload will soon walk. Silver blankets hang between the ribs, wrapping the cabin in a thermal shield that protects against the freezing cold of the upper atmosphere. White bins snap onto the ceiling brackets, locking storage into place overhead, ready to hold the weight of the hull for the journey. The crane drops the heavy white box through the roof, landing the galley module on the rails with a heavy, precise industrial thud. Check the gold pins in the block, ensuring every circuit in this massive connector is ready to carry the current without a fault. Slide the brain into the console, locking the flight computer into the rack where the pilots will punch in the coordinates for flight. The drill secures the panel while the galley cart rumbles down the aisle, slamming into the stops to prove the interior is tough. Latch the kitchen tight and bolt the metal tracks to the cargo floor, building the roller system that moves freight in the belly. The power gun zips bolts into the beams, anchoring the long metal rails that will hold the seats down against the takeoff force. Hands work in the sealing, snapping wire connectors and tubing together to feed air and power to every single row in the cabin. Connect the white lung of the ship, clamping the flexible duct tight to ensure cold air flows through the ceiling to the passengers. Slide the heavy metal server into the bay, locking the levers down to secure the digital heart of the avionics system below deck. The fan screams as we check the flow, measuring the wind speed to keep the critical electronics cool when the systems run heavy. Haul the pilot's throne onto the tracks, locking the seat pins into the floor so the captain stays secure during the turbulence ahead. Push the plug into the frame, sealing the emergency exit against the rubber gasket to hold the pressure when we climb to altitude. Screens glow in the control room as we pump the hull full of air, watching the data lines to prove the seal holds. The tug growls low and deep, hauling the gray ghost forward across the concrete, moving the unpainted giant toward its next stage of life. Laser dots track the nose as it rolls, measuring alignment and motion, while the crew walks the line to ensure the path is true. Unlatch the heavy nose cone and swing it wide, revealing the radar bulkhead hidden behind the shell that will pierce the clouds ahead. The automated beast clamps onto the joint, driving the drill bit through titanium and aluminum spraying coolant as it bores the structural heart. Two men pull the long bar, straining against the metal until the torque wrench cracks loud and sharp, locking the wing to the body. Slide the curved panel into place on the pylon, lining up the holes before the driver zips the fasteners flush with the gray skin. Tighten the steel vanes inside the pylon, locking down the hydraulic lines that will feed power to the engine controls on the wing. Watch the trailing edge extend mechanical muscle, pushing the flaps out into the airstream. Testing the lift devices that control the descent and landing. Chrome shines under the rag as he wipes the strut, inspecting the massive shock absorber that will take the full impact of the touchdown. Hydraulics scream as the heavy gear folds up the massive legs, retracting into the belly of the ship, testing the sequence for the flight. The doors slam shut with a heavy thud, sealing the wheel well tight, while the pilot flips the switches to verify the system logic. Green lasers map the underside of the wing, guiding the alignment of the pylon interface where the engine will hang and thrust the bird. It takes brute force to lock these bolts, pulling the wrench until the steel snaps, securing the mount that holds the engine against gravity. The low transporter carries the massive gear assembly wheels and brakes ready to be lifted and installed into the waiting belly of the aircraft. Chains rattle and the hoist winds, pulling the heavy landing gear vertical, lifting the steel legs toward their home inside the aircraft wheel well. Watch the trunnions settle into the bearings, locking the gear into the airframe structure with a heavy clunk that signals the legs are home. Mask the glass with blue tape, sealing the windows tight against the spray, prepping the fuselage skin for the paint that covers the composite. The robot sander grinds the surface orbiting across the skin to roughen the texture, ensuring the paint will bond hard to the fuselage shell. The nozzle hisses a fine white mist, coating the aircraft in a glossy layer that protects the skin and shines bright under the lights. Blue paint flows onto the tail fin, the robotic arm, tracing the logo curves with perfect consistency, branding the ship for the world to see. Hands smooth the decal onto the wet paint, squeegeeing the white bird onto the blue fin to mark the identity of the airline carrier. Heat lamps glow orange hot, baking the paint and graphics onto the metal, curing the finish to withstand the freezing speeds of flight. Peel the blue tape back slow and steady, revealing the razor-sharp line where white meets blue, the signature of a perfect paint job. The buffer spins and whirs, polishing the white skin to a mirror shine that reflects the hangar lights and slips through the air. Clamp the heavy yellow steel onto the nose gear, locking the tow bar to the pin so the tug can take control of movement. The diesel engine roars to life, pushing the massive bird backward into the sunlight, rolling the aircraft out of the nest and onto the tarmac. Tires crunch on the asphalt as she walks the line, inspecting the gear and the skin in the bright, unforgiving light of the day. The crane lifts the Titan engine, hoisting the massive turbofan toward the wing, ready to hang the power plant that drives this heavy machine. Guide the engine onto the lugs, aligning the heavy mass with the pylon mounts until the steel pins slide home and lock it tight. Swing the cowlings shut and latch them down, encasing the machinery in an aerodynamic shell that smooths the air around the engine core. Spin the black cone onto the fan hub, locking the spinner in place to direct air into the blades that will generate the thrust. Connect the harness to the brain-twisting safety wire tight to lock the plugs that feed data and power to the engine control unit. Bolt the radar dish to the bulkhead, installing the eye that sees through the storm, securing the antenna inside the protective nose radome. Check the turbine under the belly, inspecting the emergency power unit that drops into the airstream if all else fails in the sky. Slide the seat legs into the tracks, driving bolts into the floor beams to anchor the rows where the passengers will sit for the journey. Mount the silver probe on the skin, securing the pitot tube that measures airspeed, the critical sensor that tells the pilots how fast they fly. Slam the metal cart into the galley slot, turning the latches to lock the food service module securely against the turbulence of the flight. Roll the blue carpet down the aisle, smoothing the fabric over the floorboards to finish the cabin path with a touch of soft textile. Run a finger down the breaker panel, checking the white buttons in the cockpit to ensure every electrical circuit is set correctly for power. Drag the heavy cable across the ramp, plugging the yellow connector into the nose to feed ground power into the aircraft systems from outside. Tap the screen and watch the cabin shift, testing the mood lights to ensure the atmosphere is perfect for the long haul ahead. Grip the stick and move it full range, feeling the precision of the fly-by-wire system that translates hand motion into aerodynamic control. Push the levers forward against the friction, commanding the thrust that will soon drive this heavy machine down the runway and into the sky. Turn the switch and wake the giant, initiating the start sequence that spins the turbine and ignites the fuel in the combustion chamber. Numbers climb green on the display while the gear doors cycle heavy and loud, proving the hydraulics are ready for the stress of flight. Pull the rubber blocks from the tires, clearing the path for the wheels to roll as we release the aircraft from its static hold. Apply the blue tape with care, masking the window frame to protect the glass before we spray the final touch-up coat on the skin. The robot arm moves in smooth, spraying a fine mist of white to blend the repair perfectly into the pristine surface of the fuselage. Atomized paint hits the metal in a cone of wet gloss, building the layer that seals the structure against the harsh elements of altitude. It finishes the curve with a steady hiss, laying down the final coat of protection that makes this aircraft shine like a new diamond. Smooth the stencil onto the wingtip, pressing out the bubbles to ensure the paint line is sharp on the curved aerodynamic end of the wing. Red lamps burn hot against the skin, curing the fresh paint with intense thermal energy to lock the finish down for the life of the ship. Peel the tape back in one long strip, revealing the crisp edge where the colors meet the mark of absolute precision in the paint shop. Buff the surface to a mirror finish, working the compound until the white paint gleams under the lights, ready for the customer to see. Lock the steel bar back onto the gear connecting the tug for the pushback that will send this bird out to the active runway. The diesel growls and the wheels turn, pushing the massive weight backward, maneuvering the aircraft out of the gate and onto the taxiway line. Walk the perimeter one last time, checking the fan blades in the inlet for debris, ensuring the machine is safe before the engines burn. Pilots run the list, flipping switches and checking screens, verifying every system is green and ready to handle the complex mission of the flight. Watch the wings dance as the hydraulics flex, moving the ailerons and spoilers to prove the flight controls are responsive and ready for action. Heat waves shimmer behind the exhaust as the turbines spin up to speed, the high bypass engine screaming with the promise of immense raw thrust. Tires thump on the concrete as the giant rolls down the center line, the engine singing a high-pitched song of power waiting to be unleashed. Full throttle engages and the roar is deafening, speed building until the wheels leave the ground and the aircraft punches a hole in the sky. The gear folds up into the belly, streamlining the shape as the plane climbs steep, leaving the earth behind for the domain of the air. High above the clouds, the ride is smooth and fast, banking over the white carpet as the engines hum a steady, powerful rhythm of cruise. Wind rushes loud as the doors open, the heavy landing gear dropping and locking into place, drag increasing as we prepare to return to Earth. Rubber smokes on the runway as the tires screech, weight settling onto the struts while the thrust reversers roar to slow the massive momentum down. Inside the cockpit, the job is done, oxygen masks on and thumbs up, confirming the test flight was a success and the bird is solid. The engines wind down to silence, heat ticking from the metal as the aircraft sits majestic on the ramp, cooling after the trial by fire. Watch it ascend into the blue, a triumph of engineering and manufacturing that proves we build the future of flight right here, right now.